it sounded utterly offensive. And anti-Semitism is anti-Jewish racism, and there can be no place for that. So I'm sure our whips and I'm sure our National Executive Committee and others who tend to get involved in these matters will be looking at everything in the round. Well, let me say, first of all, with respect to Mr. Raab, look, it's right to be demanding and inquisitive and to push your civil servants. I want to be the Work and Pension Secretary. I will be demanding when it comes to helping people find quality jobs, to lifting children out of poverty, for supporting disabled people, 1 million more disabled people in poverty after 30 years of the Conservatives, for protecting pensioners. So it's right to be demanding in the service of the British public. But reading the report, it's clear that Dominic Raab crossed the line in the way his behaviour was intimidating and aggressive and humiliating. You can affect change by not humiliating people, by not intimidating people. And of course, it's not just that he's a bullying minister. I would argue he's also a failing minister. We've got the backlog in the courts, the failure to pursue prosecutions and convictions, particularly for when it comes to rape, for example. And the problems in the criminal justice system are more symptomatic of problems in all of our public services after 13 years of the Conservatives and government. But yes, we need to responsibly, we need to deal with it whenever we come across it in all walks of life, absolutely.
Have you seen evidence of bad behaviour yourself from anyone, either within the shadow cabinet, within your own party?
Personally, no, but I'm not going to be moralistic and be on a high horse here. I mean, I'm sure there are examples across the whole of Parliament, and we need a system and a culture where victims feel that they can come forward, raise their concerns, that they are not ostracised or belittled or for doing so, that they don't feel that their career is affected by raising concerns. Those processes obviously need to be in place.
I mean, there is a bit of a problem there, isn't there? Because Rosie Duffield, for example, who has been, very robust and outspoken on certain issues, has also come in for some criticism. Some might say some fairly inappropriate treatment from members of her own party. That would be certainly her take on it. And yet that seems to, it doesn't seem to have been acted on by the Labour Party leadership.
Well, I mean, I've got a lot of time and I've got huge respect for Rosie. She's a colleague in the Parliamentary Labour Party. She's allowed to and should be allowed to express her views and not feel intimidated for doing so. And I do think sometimes when you look at the tenor of the debate, particularly on social media, where people have views which other people disagree with strongly, they should not feel intimidated and bullied for expressing those views.
But I think Rosie Duffield would say that she does sometimes feel that, and she also doesn't feel particularly supported by the Labour Party.
Well, I would support Rosie Duffield, and I know Rosie, and I see her in Parliament, and the Labour Party should be a welcoming place for people who have different opinions about these very sensitive issues.
Do you think that anti-Semitism is racism?
Yes.
You do. So do you think there should be action against Diane Abbott, who's written to the newspapers saying it's true that many types of white people with points of difference, such as redheads, can experience prejudice, but they are not all their lives subject to racism? And she particularly talks about Irish, Jewish and traveller people with reference to that. What do you make of that? Do you think that, bearing in mind the actions taken against Jeremy Corbyn, that perhaps some action should be taken against her?
I've not seen the letter, but I understand it's getting tweeted about. It sounds deeply, deeply offensive to me, deeply wrong. Anti-Semitism is anti-Jewish racism. There is no place for anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. I don't know, unless there's breaking news on Twitter or whatever, but I'm sure the Labour Party will be looking at this. I'm sure our whips are looking at this. We've created or established a more independent process in the Labour Party because we don't want politicians interfering in these disciplinary matters, quite rightly. So it's not for me to, if you like, insert myself in a disciplinary matter. But I would expect that our bodies in the Labour Party who are responsible for these issues will be looking into this for what sounds like deeply offensive comments.
Do you think the inability to shake off the shadow of Corbynism is one of the reasons why the Labour Party appears now to be dropping in the polls again?
Well, first of all, look, I mean, I never believed those very, very big sort of 30% leads that the Labour Party picked up in the opinion polls last year when the Conservatives crashed the economy and sent everybody's mortgages and rent payments up through the roof. And of course, many working families are already continuing to live with those increased mortgages, as well as paying more in tax under Rishi Sunak, and of course, paying more for their weekly shopping and their energy bills because of 13 years of economic failure. I always thought the polls were much narrower, but I do get a sense that when I'm campaigning that people have had enough of the Conservatives demanding that they pay the price for 13 years of the Conservatives. And I don't believe the Conservatives can be trusted with the future, and nor can they make amends for their mistakes of the past. And look, we're campaigning hard in these local elections. I'm not going to make any predictions. And in the end, the British people will decide, or the people who live in areas which have cancelled elections will pass their judgment on election day.
Jonathan Ashworth, in the last few moments, as you said, on Twitter, things do happen pretty quickly. Diane Abbott has released a statement. She's written, "I'm writing regarding my letter that was recently published in The Observer. I wish to wholly and unreservedly withdraw my remarks and disassociate myself from them. The errors arose in an initial draft being sent, but there is no excuse, and I wish to apologise for any anguish caused. Racism takes many forms. It's completely undeniable that Jewish people have suffered its monstrous effects. I have Irish people, travellers, and many others. Once again, I would like to apologise publicly for the remarks and any distress caused as a result of them." Is that enough for you? I mean, earlier you were just talking there about potentially an investigation looking into those comments. Do you think that apology is enough for that to be halted, I suppose?
Well, I've not read the original letter, but I'm sure that there'll be. We have set up a disciplinary process, which is arm's length from members of Parliament like myself because of interference in past disciplinary processes. What I do know is that from the way that you described the original letter to me, and I've no reason to dispute your description at all, but from the way you've described it, it sounded utterly offensive, and anti-Semitism is anti-Jewish racism, and there can be no place for that. So look, I'm sure our whips and I'm sure our National Executive Committee and others who tend to get involved in these matters will be looking at everything in the round.
Moving on to the coronation, do you think politicians who've spoken out, like Humza Yousaf, the Scottish First Minister, as avowed Republicans, do you think they should be attending and joining in the celebrations?
Oh, right, my word, I wasn't expecting that question. Look, if he's the First Minister of Scotland, by all accounts, he's a very poorly performing First Minister of Scotland, and with a very poor record on the National Health Service and education and so on in Scotland. But of course, it's appropriate that the First Ministers of Scotland, Wales, attend the coronation.
I mean, there are a few Republicans in Labour ranks, aren't there?
Well, yeah, there are, but I mean, it's not the policy of the Labour Party to. We are most Labour MPs and most Labour members, I'm sure, as our constituents are looking forward to the bank holiday weekend and the coronation and celebrating.
Can I just ask you, just finally on that? I mean, we're talking about cost of living, talking about food price emergency. Do you think it's appropriate for the amount of money that's being spent on the coronation to be spent at this particular time?
Yeah, I mean, we always fund the palace and the appropriate ceremonies associated with royal matters. So yes, I'm not going to disagree with the funding for the coronation.
Are you're going to be going? You're going to be celebrating it?
Well, I've not got a ticket, sadly.
Oh, I heard there was a bit of a bun fight for tickets.
I've not got a ticket. I did have the extraordinary privilege of attending the proclamation back in autumn last year as a member of the Privy Council, but I'm afraid I've not got a ticket for the coronation. But look, my constituents in Leicester will be celebrating the coronation, and I look forward to joining my constituents in Leicester at an appropriate event where the community will come together. And I think what I'm really looking forward to is that, given that I represent Leicester, which I'm sure you and the listeners are aware is an incredibly multicultural, multi-faith city, I'm particularly looking forward to the way in which different faiths will be represented at this coronation. And I know across our gurdwaras, our Hindu temples, our mosques, our churches, our synagogues, our Jain temples in Leicester, as elsewhere across the country, people are coming together to really celebrate this coronation. And of course, people of no faith will be celebrating as well. So I'm looking forward to it, as are my two daughters. They are really looking forward to it. They can't wait to watch it.